What if a single golden retriever could shatter centuries of alien military doctrine? When Commander Vex Thornblade first sees Jake Rivers' emotional support animal, he dismisses it as a primitive Earth creature, until Rex's gentle nature reveals humanity's secret weapon, the power to turn predators into partners. This isn't a story about technology or brute force. It's about how a dog's wagging tail forced the galaxy to reconsider everything they knew about strength, loyalty, and what it truly means to be a guardian. Imagine this, a world where no creature with teeth ever voluntarily followed orders. That's the Galactic Defense Academy before Jake Rivers and Rex arrived. Jake walked through the chrome-plated archway of the main hangar with a golden retriever, padding quietly at his side. His posture relaxed, a stark contrast to the rigid formations of alien cadets moving in perfect sync around him. The moment the automated doors sealed behind him, you could feel the atmosphere shift. It wasn't just the scent of clean air and ionized metal anymore. It was the unfamiliar musk of an Earth animal, the soft jingle of a collar, the quiet panting of a creature that didn't belong. Commander Vex Thornblade, a tall being with iridescent plating along his forearms, approached with the clipped efficiency of someone who'd never encountered a pet. His eyes didn't soften at the sight of Rex's wagging tail. Instead, they narrowed. To him, this was no companion, it was a biological anomaly. A four-legged carnivore, permitted to roam freely near high-value military assets. His first question wasn't about Jake's qualifications or his file. It was, "What is that?" Jake's reply, that Rex was an emotional support animal, was met with confusion. Support, emotional, the terms didn't align with Thornblade's understanding of order. In his culture, strength came from discipline, from augmented physiology, from unbreakable hierarchy, not from a furry beast that looked like it could rip your throat out but instead leaned against its human's leg and whined softly. You could see the skepticism in the way the other alien officers kept their distance, their hands hovering near sidearms they didn't need to draw. They saw Rex's size, the intelligence in his eyes, the muscle coiled beneath golden fur. They wondered how a species so fragile, without natural armor or built-in weaponry, had ever survived long enough to achieve spaceflight, let alone earn an invitation to the galaxy's most elite training facility. Jake's calm explanation that Rex was harmless only deepened the disconnect. Harmless was not a word in the Academy's operational vocabulary. Trust was earned through protocols, through scans, through verifiable data, not through the word of a cadet from a planet known for its chaotic evolution. The silence that followed wasn't just awkward, it was ideological. Two definitions of power stood in the same room and neither understood the other. Rex, for his part, remained still. He sensed the tension, the unfamiliar sense of fear and caution rolling off beings who had never seen a dog. He didn't growl. He didn't bark. He just sat, attentive, waiting. But his presence alone was disruptive. It challenged everything the Galactic Defense Academy stood for: order, predictability, control, and then it happened. A junior officer, emboldened by procedure, took a step forward to scan Rex without permission. Rex turned his head, ears perked, and let out a low chuff of curiosity. It wasn't aggressive. It was just sound, but in the tense quiet of the hangar it echoed like a warning. The officer froze. Thornblade's hand went up, signaling halt. Every set of alien eyes locked onto the dog. In that moment, Rex wasn't a support animal. He was a variable, an unknown, a quiet living breach of galactic military doctrine. What happens when the unknown takes a step toward you? 2 days later, the courtyard became the stage for a misunderstanding that would ripple through the entire academy. Drill Sergeant Ironjaw, a four-armed tactical specialist known for grinding new recruits into polished soldiers, spotted Jake and Rex during a precision marching drill. He didn't shout. He didn't even break formation. He simply turned, his metallic jaw clicking in disapproval, and strode over with the grim purpose of someone about to correct a critical error. "Cadet," he said, his voice a low frequency that vibrated in the chest. "Explain the biological hazard." Jake stood at attention, but Rex didn't. The dog, picking up on the sergeant's focused attention, interpreted it as engagement. He took a single step forward, his tail giving a tentative, friendly sweep. He lowered his head slightly, a classic canine gesture of polite inquiry, and sniffed the air between them. To Iron Jaw, this was not curiosity. It was a pre-strike posture, The lean forward, the focused eyes, the bared teeth. Rex's panting smile looked like a snarl to someone who'd never seen a happy dog. Ironjaw's secondary set of arms instinctively came up, a defensive posture taught in close-quarters combat. The movement was sharp, sudden. Rex, startled by the quick motion, let out a short, sharp bark. Not angry, not aggressive, just a noise of surprise. But in the silent, orderly courtyard it sounded like a detonation. Alarms blared automatically. The Academy's security system, tuned to recognize sudden loud noises and aggressive postures, flagged the courtyard as a potential conflict zone. Panic didn't spread slowly. It erupted. Cadets from a dozen species froze or dropped into defensive stances. Training took over. They saw their most feared drill sergeant in a standoff with a furry Earth predator. Jake dropped to a knee beside Rex, a hand on his collar. "It's okay, he's friendly. He was just saying hello." But his words were swallowed by the klaxons and the rising buzz of confusion. No one heard him. They saw only the scene, the human trying to restrain his beast. Ironjaw, for his part, never took his eyes off Rex. The bark had triggered a deep instinctual response. His species were prey animals in their distant evolutionary past, and the sound of a large carnivore's vocalization hit a primal nerve. His respiratory system constricted. His heart rate spiked. The stress, combined with the shock of the alarm and the perceived threat, was too much. His systems overloaded. Without another sound, his eyes rolled back and his large frame hit the polished stone courtyard with a heavy thud. The panic transformed. Now it wasn't just about a possible animal attack. It was about a senior staff member down. A medical team, already en route because of the alarm, burst into the courtyard with a grav stretcher. They swarmed Ironjaw, scanning for injuries, for poison, for any sign of what could take down such a formidable being. They found nothing, just a runaway stress response. Jake stood there, Rex now sitting calmly by his side, whining softly at all the commotion. The image was seared into every witness's memory. The unconscious drill sergeant, the bewildered human, and the beast that appeared to have defeated a warrior with a single bark. By that evening, the story had mutated. In the mess hall, cadets whispered that the earth animal had a sonic attack, that it could disable opponents with a look, that the human had it under some kind of primitive mind control. The incident forced the command staff to convene an emergency meeting. They had to reconcile their initial dismissal of Rex as a simple animal with the undeniable fact that his presence had incapacitated one of their best. They didn't have a protocol for this. They didn't have a category. The only thing they knew for certain was that their understanding of Jake, of Rex, and of humanity itself had just been proven completely and publicly wrong. And that miscalculation began to change how they spoke to Jake from that day forward. Commander Silas Brighter didn't summon Jake to his office for a casual chat. The setting was deliberate. A stark tactical briefing room, walls lined with holographic displays showing fleet formations and threat assessments. Brighter stood before a screen frozen on security footage of the courtyard incident, his posture rigid, his eyes fixed not on Jake, but on the image of Rex. He didn't see a pet. He saw a tactical anomaly. His first question cut straight to the assumption underpinning all alien military doctrine. If something has power, it must be a weapon. Cadet Rivers, he began, his voice devoid of the warmth Jake was used to from Rex. The classification of your companion asset is unclear. Its neutralization of a senior drill instructor suggests combat training. Outline its operational parameters. Jake took a breath. He'd explained this before, but never to someone who saw the world entirely in terms of assets and threats. Sir, Rex isn't an asset. He's my dog. He's not trained for combat. He barks when he's surprised. He knocked over Sergeant Ironjaw because the sergeant got scared and fainted. It was an accident. Brighter's expression didn't change. The words dog and accident didn't compute within his framework. In his experience, a creature with sharp teeth, muscle mass, and advanced sensory capabilities was either a controlled weapon or a wild predator. The concept of a third category, a bonded companion, was like trying to describe a color he'd never seen. Explain the bonding mechanism, he demanded. Is it neural imprinting? Chemical compliance? How do you ensure its loyalty does not become a liability? This was the core of the misunderstanding. Jake tried to frame it in terms Brighter might grasp. It's not a mechanism, Commander. It's trust. I feed him, I play with him, I keep him safe. He wants to be near me. His loyalty isn't programmed. It's earned." The commander fell silent, studying the frozen image of Rex, who was caught mid-tail wag. Brighter's species had domesticated plant life for bioluminescence and servant drones for labor. They had never attempted to co-evolve with another predator. The very idea was terrifying. To willingly live with, care for, and love a creature that could, if it chose, cause you serious harm? It implied a level of interspecies trust so profound it bordered on insanity. Or brilliance. Brighter's mind began to recalibrate. If this was true, then Rex was not a weapon. He was something potentially more disruptive, a psychological tool. A creature whose very presence could project calm or incite panic, based on its relationship to a human. His loyalty wasn't a liability, it was a force multiplier. The threat wasn't that Rex would attack on command. The threat was that he wouldn't need to. His simple presence and the bond he represented could destabilize opponents who understood power only as something to be wielded, not shared. This realization forced a crack in Brighter's worldview. He wasn't just looking at a dog. He was looking at evidence that humanity's greatest strength wasn't technology or strategy, but their profoundly strange ability to build bridges into the consciousness of other beings. They didn't conquer nature. They invited it inside. That changed the entire calculus of galactic security. How do you defend against a species that turns potential threats into family? The meeting ended without any official change in Rex's status, but something fundamental had shifted in the room. Brighter dismissed Jake with a curt nod, his gaze lingering on the cadet as he left. The commander didn't see a rule breaker anymore. He saw a representative of a culture that could redefine alliance. The question was no longer how to control the beast, but how to understand the bond that held it. And that question would ensure Rex's presence moved from a disciplinary issue to a subject of intense, quiet study within the Academy's daily routine. The dormitory wing, usually a place of disciplined quiet and rigid personal space, became a live experiment in cross-species socialization. Rex's arrival shifted the energy completely. His designated corner near Jake's bunk was just a mat and a water bowl, but it might as well have been a diplomatic embassy. For the first few nights, cadets gave it a wide berth. They moved along the far wall, their eyes tracking the dog's every shift in posture, every twitch of an ear. A soft whine from Rex in his sleep could make 3 different cadets from as many species freeze mid-step, their hands instinctively going to non-existent weapons. The tension was a physical thing, a low hum in the air. It began to break with sound. Not barks, but the rhythmic thump of Rex's tail against the floor when Jake returned from classes. That solid, steady beat was unfamiliar. It wasn't a warning click or a hostile hiss. It was a percussive signal of pure contentment. Then came the more deliberate interactions. A cadet from a low-gravity world dropped a data slate. Before they could bend their fragile limbs to retrieve it, Rex had already picked it up gently in his mouth, carried it over, and dropped it at their feet. He then looked up, waiting, not for a reward, but for acknowledgement. The cadet, stunned, simply stared. It was a simple act of assistance from a creature they'd been taught to view as a primal threat. The head bumps were the real turning point. Rex, wanting attention, would approach a cadet who seemed less nervous and press his head against their leg or hand. This gesture, a dog's request for affection, was initially met with full-body flinches. But the dog never followed up with aggression. He just stood there, patient, until the frozen cadet tentatively moved a hand. The first time a feathered cadet from the Giral system ran their fingers through the thick fur on Rex's neck, the entire dormitory seemed to hold its breath. Rex leaned into the touch, his eyes closing. The Giralian made a soft, surprised chirping sound. The ice was broken. Jake found himself acting as a translator for Rex's behavior. Cadets would ask hesitant questions. "Why does it bring me things?" "What does the tail mean?" "It shows its teeth. Is that a threat?" Jake explained the concepts of retrieving, of a wagging tail indicating happiness, of a panting mouth being a sign of a relaxed state. He framed it in terms they could start to grasp. He sees all of you as part of his pack now. His job is to look out for you. He wants to please you. If you're happy, he's done his job. A new unspoken routine developed. A cadet on kitchen duty would save a small portion of protein for Rex. Another started leaving their door slightly ajar so Rex could wander in and curl up on the floor while they studied. The Academy administration, monitoring the situation closely, didn't shut it down. Instead, they made adjustments. They installed a larger water dispenser in the hall. They subtly altered the cleaning bot's routes to avoid startling the dog during his naps. They were, in their own bureaucratic way, accommodating him. This quiet integration did more than just make Rex a familiar sight. It challenged the foundational idea that power and gentleness couldn't coexist in one being. Here was a creature that could, by all physical metrics, be a formidable opponent, yet he spent his evenings accepting head scratches and returning lost items. He was a living paradox to them. His presence in their living space forced a reevaluation of what safety looked like. It wasn't just the absence of threat. It could also be the presence of a loyal guardian, one whose strength was only ever used to protect. The dorm, once a place of isolated individual preparation, began to feel for the first time like a shared home. And that sense of communal security would soon be tested in the most public space of all. The dining hall was where theory met practice. If the dormitory was a private laboratory for cross-species interaction, the mess hall was the grand stage. Here, amidst the clatter of trays and the murmur of 100 different languages, Rex's presence became a public spectacle. Cadets from species with exoskeletons, those with tentacles, others with bioluminescent markings, they all watched the golden retriever navigate the aisles between tables. The air was thick with a mix of curiosity and deeply ingrained caution. A predator was loose during mealtime, a scenario that violated countless evolutionary warnings. Jake sat at a central table, Rex lying dutifully at his feet. The tension was a visible thing. Cadets kept their limbs close, their eyes flicking downward. A napkin made of a lightweight polymer slipped from the grasp of a nervous cadet and fluttered to the floor. Before anyone could react, Rex was up. He didn't lunge. He walked over, picked up the corner of the napkin gently in his teeth and brought it back, dropping it onto the cadet's lap. He then looked up, his tail giving a single hopeful thump against the leg of the table. The cadet, a being with large liquid eyes, froze for a second. Then hesitantly they reached out and patted Rex's head. It was a small gesture, but in that vast crowded room it felt monumental. Jake saw the moment and explained it to the table. He's not just fetching. He's trying to figure you out. He wants to know what makes you happy. If you're pleased he brought it back, he'll remember that. He learns the rules by what you reward. This simple feedback loop was a revelation. Alien societies operated on explicit command structures and pre-programmed protocols. The idea of a non-verbal cooperative learning process with another species was alien. They began to see Rex's actions not as trained tricks, but as a continuous living conversation. A cadet would accidentally drop a piece of food. Rex would look at it, then at the cadet, waiting for a signal. If the cadet nodded, he would gently take it. If they shook their head, he would leave it. He was constantly reading them, and they, in turn, were learning to communicate with him. These interactions built a new kind of social contract, one based on mutual understanding instead of fear. The powerful jaws that could have been a weapon were used to carry things carefully. The alert posture that signaled danger was now directed at a dropped item. The aliens began a collective unspoken reinterpretation. Perhaps a predator wasn't defined solely by its ability to harm. Perhaps it could also be defined by its capacity for cooperation, for reading social cues, for offering affection. Rex became a bridge. A cadet from a water world might never share a language with a cadet from a high-gravity planet, but they could both share a moment watching Rex perform his simple, helpful tasks. They could both understand the universal language of a wagging tail. Trust, which had always been a fragile, formal construct between species, began to grow organically around this one animal. It was a trust built on observed action, not promised loyalty. This environment directly challenged the Academy's core doctrine. Their entire philosophy was built on a clear hierarchy of strength, where power was synonymous with control and separation. Weakness was a flaw to be eliminated, but here was Rex, a creature of obvious physical power, choosing gentleness. His strength wasn't a wall, it was an open door. He was strong, so he could afford to be kind. He was alert, so he could afford to be patient. This flipped the entire script. It suggested that true security might not come from dominating your environment, but from integrating with it so completely that its well-being becomes your own. The resolution unfolded quietly, over countless meals. The dining hall, once a place of segregated species and quiet suspicion, slowly became a common ground. The hesitation around Rex melted into familiarity, and then into a quiet appreciation. He was no longer the beast in the courtyard. He was the dog in the dining hall, and this newfound acceptance of him as a partner, not a problem, set the stage for the next phase of his life at the academy. His popularity was about to shift from a social curiosity to a formalized role, and that transition would begin with one cadet deciding to teach him something new. By the third week, a shift occurred that no official memo could ever authorize. Rex stopped being Jake's +1 and became the academy's teammate. You could see it in the small things. Cadet Zira Starwaver, who once watched him from 2 tables away, now saved a portion of her meal for him every day. She explained it to a curious tablemate not as a reward but as a duty. He looked hungry, she'd say, or his eyes seemed sad when we ate without him. These weren't tactical assessments. They were observations of a fellow creature's needs, a basic empathy extending across a biological divide far wider than any they'd crossed before. This new status got formalized in an unexpected way. Cadet Next Voidbringer, a being whose species prized precise order above all else, started structured training sessions with Rex. It began as a simple experiment in interspecies communication. Next wanted to see if the dog could learn a nonverbal command system. They used small protein bits as incentives, and the process was methodical. A flat hand held palm up meant sit. A pointed finger meant stay. An open palm presented meant shake. Rex, intelligent and eager to please, picked it up with a speed that surprised everyone, especially Next. Within days, he could perform a sequence of actions on silent command. It wasn't magic. It was proof of a shared language built on patience and mutual respect. This was the first voluntary, formalized training a non-human had ever conducted with Rex, and it worked. Even Ironjaw's stance evolved. His near-fainting spell in the courtyard had been a deep professional embarrassment, and his initial resentment was sharp. But he was a soldier, and he recognized discipline when he saw it. Watching Rex hold a perfect stay for 3 full minutes during one of Next's sessions, his only movement, the rhythmic sweep of his tail, forced a recalculation. The contempt in the sergeant's eyes didn't vanish, but it was joined by a new, wary respect. He saw an animal that could control its impulses, that responded to authority, that understood the chain of command in its own way. It wasn't the discipline he knew, but it was discipline nonetheless. The academy staff monitoring all this didn't fight the change. They adapted to it. They drafted new safety protocols specifically for Rex's presence during drills. They designated off-limit zones and approved interaction areas. They issued a bulletin on proper canine etiquette, a document that would have been unthinkable a month prior. The very bureaucracy of the place was bending to accommodate him. Rex's role transformed completely. He was no longer the dubious emotional support animal from a backwater planet. He became a living symbol. When cadets saw him, they didn't just see a pet. They saw a working partnership. They saw proof that 2 completely different species could not only coexist, but could collaborate, could learn from each other, could become a single unit. This idea, more than anything else, began to elevate morale. A quiet cohesion started to form across the different species lines. They all had Rex in common. They all shared the experience of learning to understand him. This collective acceptance had a concrete outcome. The command staff, led by Silas Brighter's quiet advocacy, began drafting preliminary plans for the galaxy's first official cross-species companion partnership program. It was a tentative framework, full of caveats and safety reviews, but it existed on paper. The question was no longer if such a thing was possible, but how to make it work on a larger scale. But theory is one thing. Practice is another. Rex's new status as a trusted teammate, a disciplined cadet by proxy, was about to face its first real-world test. The controlled environment of the dorm and the dining hall was one thing. The unpredictable chaos of a live combat drill, where instincts override training, was something else entirely. The academy was about to see what happened when Rex's loyalty was not just appreciated, but truly needed. The combat drill field was a wide circle of packed earth, surrounded by observation decks and holographic projectors ready to simulate enemy combatants. Today's exercise was simple hand-to-hand sparring, a test of strength and technique between paired cadets. Jake faced off against Torclaw, a cadet from a heavily built species known for their raw power and aggressive grappling style. The match began normally. They circled, locked arms, tested each other's balance. But Torclaw fought to win. He drove forward, using his greater mass to force Jake down, pinning him hard against the ground. It was a standard move, a demonstration of controlled dominance within the rules of the drill. But rules are a human concept. Rex, watching from the sideline where he'd been told to stay, saw something different. He saw his human being forced down. He saw strain. He heard Jake's grunt of effort. The part of Rex's brain that was bred for millennia to protect its flock switched on in an instant. His posture changed. The relaxed, wagging companion was gone. His body went stiff, his head lowered, and a low, rumbling growl vibrated in his chest, a sound no one at the academy had ever heard from him before. He didn't bark. He didn't charge. He took 3 deliberate steps forward, his eyes locked on Torclaw, his movements precise and focused. It was the advance of a predator singling out a threat. From the observation deck, Ironjaw saw it all. He didn't see a concerned dog. He saw the courtyard incident replaying, but this time with clear intent. His hand slammed down on the emergency alert panel without a second thought. A different, more urgent alarm blared across the field. The one reserved for active containment breaches or hostile intrusions. The sparring match stopped dead. Every cadet froze. The holographic enemies flickered and died. All attention snapped to the center of the field, where Rex now stood between Jake and Torclaw, his body a tense barrier. Chaosis, a fragile thing. It only needs a spark. This was that spark. The alarm screamed. Cadets dropped into defensive postures, unsure where the real threat was coming from. Instructors shouted conflicting orders. And in the middle of it all stood the dog, the focus of every panicked look. The military precision of the academy dissolved into a single tense standoff. Jake, scrambling to his feet, was shouting that it was okay, that Rex was just confused, but his words were lost. The question hanging in the air was no longer about winning a sparring match. It was about what this animal would do next. Was this the moment his loyalty became a liability? Was this the primal beast they had always feared, finally unleashed? The anticipation broke not with violence, but with a calm voice. Zira Starwaver didn't run. She didn't shout. She simply walked into the center of the field, moving slowly, her hands held open at her sides. She ignored Torclaw, she ignored Jake. She focused entirely on Rex. "Hey, boy," she said, her voice soft but clear even over the alarm. "It's just play, see? Everyone's okay." She didn't reach for him. She just knelt a few meters away, her posture relaxed and made a gentle clicking sound with her tongue. Rex's head turned. The growling stopped. His ears, which had been pinned back, twitched forward. He knew Zira. He knew her scent, her voice, the treats she saved for him. Her calmness was a direct counter to the tension radiating from everyone else. She was reframing the entire scene for him, not with commands, but with tone and presence. She was telling him this wasn't a real fight. It was a game. Jake, seeing his chance, picked up on her cue. "See, Rex? Play, it's just play." He clapped his hands together, the universal dog signal for fun. Rex's tail gave a hesitant, half-hearted wag. The stiffness left his shoulders. He looked from Zira to Jake, then back at Torclaw, who was still watching warily. The imminent danger passed. The standoff was over. The alarm cut off, leaving a ringing silence in its wake. The crisis had been averted not by weapons or force, but by trust and a shared language that went deeper than words. The lesson for everyone watching was immediate and profound. Rex's protective instinct wasn't a flaw. It was a tool. And like any tool, its application depended entirely on who was guiding it. This near disaster proved he could be guided. It proved his loyalty was not a blind aggression, but a focused response that could be managed, understood, and even leveraged. Imagine every alarm on the base screaming and a fully grown alien soldier pinned by a sparring partner. But the real threat isn't either fighter. It's their audience. Rex stood between his human and a potential threat, his entire body rigid, his growl a low vibration cutting through the noise. Everyone saw a weapon about to activate. Everyone except Cadet Zira Starwaver. She didn't see a weapon. She saw a confused protector. While others stepped back, she stepped forward. She moved into the center of the field with a calm that defied the chaos, her hands open at her sides, her posture relaxed. She didn't shout. She didn't order. She spoke to Rex in a soft voice, using a tone that was gentle and reassuring. "Hey, boy. It's just play, see? Everyone's okay. Her actions carried immense risk. She placed herself directly in the path of a creature the entire academy still viewed with deep suspicion, trusting that her previous interactions with him mattered more than his current aggressive posture. She was banking everything on the idea that his social intelligence would override his instinct. She knelt a few meters away, not reaching for him, not making any sudden moves. She simply made herself a calm presence in the middle of the storm. In doing so, she demonstrated a profound truth. The basic dynamics of a pack, the need for clear communication and trusted leadership, are not confined to a single species. They are a universal language. Jake, seeing what she was doing, immediately reinforced her message. His words were crucial. He didn't yell in pain or fear, which would have confirmed Rex's concern. Instead, he used a light, even tone. "I'm fine, Rex, just learning how to get beaten up professionally." This was the key. Rex had learned to read human emotional states through vocal cues. A hurt human doesn't sound calm and conversational. Jake's relaxed delivery, combined with Zir's non-threatening presence, gave Rex the data points he needed to reassess the situation. The threat level in his mind dropped significantly. This intervention did more than just stop a possible attack. It completely reframed Rex's role for everyone watching. He wasn't a simple animal that needed to be controlled or a weapon that needed to be aimed. He was a mediator. His actions were a direct response to the social and emotional signals he received. He could be de-escalated. He could be reasoned with, not through force but through understanding. The universality of this social signaling became undeniable. A soft voice, an open palm, a relaxed posture, these were cues that transcended biology. They built trust. Later, Commander Vex reviewed the security footage of the incident repeatedly. He didn't focus on the alarm or the panic. He focused on the few seconds of interaction between Zir, Jake, and Rex. He saw the precise moment Rex's stance relaxed, the moment the growl stopped, the moment his tail gave that first tentative wag. Vex wasn't just watching a cadet calm a dog. He was watching a complex interspecies negotiation happen in real time. He saw proof that Rex possessed a level of social comprehension they had never credited him with. He could distinguish between a real fight and a training exercise based on the tone of voice and body language of those he trusted. The resolution was clear. Trust and leadership had emerged from the most unlikely of places. A spontaneous pack dynamic formed between a human, an alien, and a dog. It proved that authority wasn't always about rank. Sometimes it was about who could communicate most effectively. Zir's leadership in that moment didn't come from a title. It came from empathy and a willingness to take a risk based on understanding. This proof that Rex could be a stabilizing force rather than a disruptive one set the stage for the next crisis, one where his unique capabilities wouldn't just prevent a fight, they would detect a threat nobody else could see. What if the most advanced security system in the galaxy could be bypassed by something that didn't even cast a shadow? The Academy's dormitory wing was supposed to be impenetrable. It had motion sensors tuned to the slightest displacement of air, thermal imagers that could detect a single degree of variance, and resonance scanners that could identify the unique vibration signature of every known species. None of them registered a thing. A shadow-born assassin, a being capable of shifting its physical form partially into another dimension, moved through the halls like a ghost. To the Academy's technology, it simply wasn't there. The threat was inside their most secure area, and their multi-million credit defense grid saw nothing but empty corridors. Rex, asleep on his mat next to Jake's bunk, didn't need sensors. His head shot up. His ears pricked forward and his body went rigid. He wasn't growling this time. He was sniffing the air in short, sharp bursts, his nose working overtime processing a scent that shouldn't exist. It was a smell of ozone and void, of a space that was both there and not there. It was the scent of dimensional displacement, and it was moving closer. He let out a single sharp bark, not the friendly noise from the courtyard. This was different. It was a sound of pure, urgent warning, a noise that made the hair on Jake's neck stand up even before he was fully awake. Jake didn't hesitate. He didn't wait for an alarm that would never sound. He didn't look at a scanner that showed an empty room. He looked at his dog. He saw the intense focus, the fixed stare at a seemingly blank section of wall, the low, continuous rumble building in Rex's chest. He trusted that. He trusted the millions of years of evolved instinct over the silent, failing technology surrounding them. "What is it, boy?" he whispered, already moving to his feet. Rex didn't look at him. He took a step toward the wall, then another, his bark becoming more insistent, more aggressive. The assassin, confident in its complete invisibility, was completely unprepared for a threat that operated on a different sensory axis. It didn't understand scent. It didn't understand that its passage left a microscopic trail of particles, a unique chemical signature that hung in the air like a breadcrumb trail. Rex's nose could follow that trail. His perception pierced the invisibility, the dimensional trickery, because it wasn't based on sight or sound. It was based on chemistry. It was a sense the Shadowborn had never evolved a counter for. The awe in the room was palpable, but so was the fear. Cadets waking up saw Jake and his dog advancing on nothing, the dog barking and snarling at empty air. It should have looked ridiculous. It didn't. The raw certainty in Rex's posture, the way Jake moved with him in perfect sync, created a tension that was almost unbearable. They were witnessing something impossible, a biological organism detecting what galactic technology could not. The question was no longer if the dog was sensing something real, but what he would do about it. The answer came quickly. The assassin, perhaps realizing its cover was somehow blown, made a move. A shimmer, almost imperceptible, flickered in the air for a fraction of a second. It was enough. Rex lunged. It wasn't a wild charge. It was a targeted, precise strike. He didn't aim for where the thing was. He aimed for where it was going to be. His jaws closed not on empty space, but on something solid, something that let out a shocked, guttural cry of pain as he drove it to the ground and pinned it there. The form of the Shadowborn flickered into visibility under the weight and pressure of the dog's body, a nightmare shape of shifting shadows and sharp angles, now completely neutralized. The galaxy's most elusive assassin had been caught by a golden retriever. The flawless technological shield had failed. The ancient biological instrument had not. This single event didn't just stop an intrusion. It forced everyone who witnessed it to question the very foundation of their security and their understanding of what true awareness really meant. What happens when your most advanced technology fails and the only thing standing between you and an invisible assassin is a dog? The Shadowborn incident didn't just stop an attack. It forced Galactic Command to tear up their playbook. For centuries, their security doctrine relied on sensor arrays, energy shields, and threat assessment algorithms. Then a golden retriever from Earth outperformed all of it without even trying. The immediate question wasn't just about Rex. It was about what else humanity might have brought with them. If one animal could do this, what other creatures on Earth possessed capabilities their technology couldn't replicate? Jake sat in the debriefing room, not as a cadet being reprimanded, but as an expert being consulted. He explained it in terms they could start to grasp. He told them that dogs don't just have good noses. They read the world differently. They notice the subtle shift in your posture when you're nervous. They hear the tiny change in your voice when you're stressed. They sense intention through a combination of scent, sound, and body language that operates on a level beyond most instruments. A sensor might scan for a specific weapon signature. A dog senses the intent to use it. This was the philosophical pivot. The aliens had always viewed strength as something you built. A bigger ship, a stronger shield, a sharper blade. They saw symbiosis as a weakness, a reliance on another being. Rex proved the opposite. A partnership could be a form of strength you couldn't engineer. It was an augmentation of capability through a deep, instinctual bond. Technology could be hacked, jammed, or outsmarted. But the bond between a human and their companion was a closed system, a private language that was incredibly difficult to disrupt. Commander Vex Thornblade reviewed the footage of the dormitory incident for the 10th time. He saw the flawless technology showing empty halls. He saw the dog reacting to a presence it shouldn't have been able to detect. The conclusion was inescapable. Humanity's real strength wasn't in their ships or their weapons, which were frankly primitive by galactic standards. Their strength was in their unique ability to form connections. They didn't conquer the other species on their planet. They partnered with them. They turned wolves into guardians. They turned potential rivals into family. This led Vex to an extraordinary realization. For his entire career, the goal had been to identify potential threats and neutralize them, either through diplomacy or overwhelming force. The human strategy, demonstrated through Jake and Rex, was different. Their strategy was to identify potential allies and integrate them. They turned strangers into family members. They built trust instead of enforcing compliance. This wasn't a naive philosophy. It was a tactical one. A loyal companion who would die for you is a far more reliable asset than the most powerful weapon system, because its loyalty cannot be bought or reprogrammed. The resolution crystallized within the command structure. The key to future galactic security might not lie in developing better scanners. It might lie in understanding these bonds. It might involve embracing the idea that the most sophisticated system in the universe is a biological one, built on millions of years of coevolution and mutual trust. This shifted the entire concept of alliance. An alliance wasn't just a treaty between governments anymore. It could be a partnership between species, between individuals, between a cadet and his dog. The conversation was no longer about whether to allow Rex. It was about how to formally include him and others like him in the defense of the galaxy. This new perspective set the stage for a direct, personal conversation that would redefine humanity's place in it all. Commander Vex Thornblade didn't summon Jake to the command deck for a formal ceremony. He found him in the quiet of the observatory, watching the swirl of a distant nebula through the massive viewport. Rex sat beside him, calm and watchful. There was no preamble. Vex's question was direct, born from weeks of observation and a shattered doctrine. The Galactic Defense Force is prepared to extend full membership to humanity, Cadet Rivers. But we need to understand the terms. Would companions like this one be part of the arrangement? The tension wasn't in the question itself, but in what it implied. Vex was still thinking in terms of assets and equipment. He was asking if the dog was standard issue. Jake's answer wasn't a negotiation point. It was a statement of fact, the core of the entire human experience he'd brought with him. He looked at Vex, then down at Rex, who thumped his tail once against the floor. "Sir," Jake said, his voice even, "humans don't go anywhere without our friends." That simple sentence reframed everything. It wasn't about bringing property. It was about bringing a participant. Rex wasn't a tool to be deployed. He was a partner in a living mutual relationship. The partnership didn't just elevate the human. It had already begun elevating the aliens around them. It challenged every assumption about intelligence, suggesting that wisdom wasn't just measured in technological achievement, but in the capacity for deep, cross-species understanding. It redefined loyalty, showing it could be a choice built on trust, not a programmed response or a forced subjugation. This perspective forced a radical shift in expectations about cooperation. The galactic community had always operated on treaties and mutually assured benefits. The human model was different. It was about forming what Jake called a pack, an inclusive cross-species unit bound not by law but by mutual care and shared purpose. This wasn't a naive concept. It was a practical one. A pack looks out for all its members. It trusts their instincts. It values their contributions, whether they come from a brain that can calculate warp trajectories or a nose that can smell dimensional shifts. The true benchmark of a mature civilization, it suggested, might not be how far its signals travel, but how wide its circle of inclusion grows. The resolution of this quiet conversation was more impactful than any diplomatic accord. It highlighted humanity's unique and, to the aliens, bewildering capacity for empathy and partnership. It proved that their greatest strength was a soft power so potent it had been completely overlooked. The stubborn, optimistic refusal to face the universe alone. They didn't see the galaxy as a series of territories to be claimed or threats to be neutralized. They saw it as a place full of potential allies if you just knew how to invite them in. This encounter moved the relationship from theory to inevitability. The Galactic Defense Force wasn't just accepting a new member species. It was accepting a new philosophy of alliance, one that came with 4 legs and a wagging tail. This fundamental acceptance meant that the Academy's leadership could no longer treat Rex as an exception to be managed. They had to build a system that could accommodate him, and the countless other partnerships that would surely follow. The conversation was over, but its implications were just beginning to unfold, setting the stage for a wave of policy changes that would formally recognize what had already become true in practice. The shift from observation to action happened faster than anyone expected. Galactic Command didn't form a committee or call for years of study. They drafted new protocols within the week, turning Rex's unexpected success into official policy. The document was dry and bureaucratic, full of sections on health checks, behavioral assessments, and integration procedures. But its purpose was revolutionary. It created a formal category for human companion partnerships, recognizing them not as pets or mascots but as co-guardians. They were to be considered part of the unit with roles in morale, security, and interspecies liaison. This wasn't an experiment anymore. It was a new standard. You could see the change on the ground. The human exchange program, which had started with a single cadet and his dog, was suddenly expanded. Applications were reviewed not just for the human candidate, but for their proposed companion's potential role and temperament. The vision was clear: full integration across military installations. This meant designing new living quarters, adapting training modules, and even modifying ship layouts to accommodate non-humanoid partners. The galaxy's most rigid institution was literally rebuilding itself around the idea of a dog. Commander Vex Thornblade stood on the observation deck, looking down at the main training yard. Rex was there, of course, but he wasn't just following Jake. A group of cadets, a mix of species, had formed a loose circle around him. One of them, a being with slender multi-jointed arms, threw a bright orange ball. Rex shot after it, snatched it out of the air, and bounded back to drop it at the cadet's feet. The cadet, who weeks ago would have flinched at the dog's approach, now reached down and ruffled the fur on his head before throwing the ball again. This simple game of fetch, being taught by a dog to aliens, was no longer just a game. It was a symbol. It represented the entire cooperative potential of the new policy. Vex watched, and for the first time he truly understood. The galaxy's future security might not depend on a bigger fleet or a stronger shield. It might depend on this. On the ability to build these bridges, to form these packs. This was a complete departure from centuries of military thinking. Strength had always been defined by autonomy and control. The strongest ship was the one that needed no outside help. The strongest soldier was the one who relied only on their own training and gear. The new policy turned that upside down. It stated that strength could come from connection, that a unit with a loyal companion was not weaker for its dependence, but stronger for its expanded capabilities and heightened morale. Companionship was no longer a sideshow, a psychological curiosity to be studied. It was a strategic asset. It was a force multiplier that worked on a level technology couldn't touch. The resolution was tangible. The Academy wasn't just tolerating Rex anymore. It was learning from him. It was building a future where his presence wasn't the exception, but the beginning of a new normal. The policy shift provided the structure, the momentum, and the official sanction for a change that had already happened in the hearts and minds of the cadets. They had already accepted him. Now the institution had to catch up. This formal recognition meant that the next time a human arrived with a companion, they wouldn't face suspicion and scanners. They would face a revised checklist and a welcome packet. The journey from unwanted arrival to essential teammate was complete, and that completion set the stage for one final, personal interaction that would perfectly encapsulate the entire transformation, an encounter that would produce the warning that gave this story its name. The change was real, but some habits of mind are harder to break than others. Commander Vex Thornblade had officially signed the new companion partnership protocols. He understood on a strategic level that Rex was a co-guardian and a psychological asset. But understanding something in a report is different from understanding it in your bones. That gap became clear one afternoon when he found Jake and Rex in a quiet corridor near the training simulators. Rex was sitting calmly, his posture relaxed, watching the cadets pass by. Vex stopped. He'd seen the footage of the Shadowborn takedown a dozen times. He'd analyzed the data, but standing this close he felt a pull of raw curiosity. He needed to know physically what this creature was. His hand moved almost without his conscious thought. It was a gesture of examination, the kind he might use to assess the build quality of a new sidearm, or the tensile strength of a hull plate. He reached out to touch the fur on Rex's shoulder, to feel the muscle and bone structure beneath. It wasn't a hostile move. It was a general's curiosity overriding a lifetime of caution. Rex's reaction was instantaneous. He didn't snarl or bite. He simply turned his head with a speed that was startling, his jaws parting just enough to reveal his teeth. He didn't make a sound. He just fixed his eyes on Vex's outstretched hand and held perfectly still. It wasn't an attack. It was a statement. A boundary. Jake's voice cut through the tension, low and firm. "Sir, I wouldn't do that," he didn't shout. He didn't move to pull Rex back. He just stated a fact. He let you get that close because he knows your command staff. He's giving you a warning. Touch him like that again without him inviting it and he will tear your hand apart. It's not a threat. It's just how he's wired. The warning hung in the air. Vex slowly withdrew his hand, his own heart rate elevated. The respect he felt for the dog in that moment was profound, and it was mixed with a healthy, rational fear. This was the complete reversal of every initial perception. On day one, they had seen a primitive beast to be scanned and controlled. Now Vex was being given a direct lesson in consent from that same animal. Rex's gentleness, his tolerance of alien cadets, his playful retrievals of dropped items, none of that was a sign of weakness or simple domestication. It was a continuous choice. He was choosing not to use the considerable power he possessed. He was choosing to be gentle. This defining moment was about more than just a dog setting a boundary. It was about the Academy learning to respect that boundary. Vex realized that true integration wasn't about forcing Rex to fit their rules. It was about learning The warning set a new parameter for their entire relationship. It established that Rex was not property to be inspected. He was a being with his own agency, his own instincts, and his own rules of engagement. His value wasn't diminished by this display. It was enhanced. It proved his discernment. He could distinguish between a friendly cadet and a commanding officer, making an unfamiliar, intrusive move. The resolution was a silent understanding that passed between the general and the cadet. Vex gave a single slow nod. He wasn't offended. He was educated. He had just received the most effective lesson in interspecies relations the Academy could ever offer, delivered not in a briefing room, but in a hallway by a golden retriever. This interaction cemented Rex's status forever. He was not a pet. He was a partner, and partners deserve respect. This lesson in mutual respect, learned through a moment of tense boundary setting, would become the foundation for everything that followed, forcing a final, deep reconsideration of what this animal truly represented, not just as a guardian, but as a psychological force. What if the most dangerous thing in a room wasn't a weapon but a choice? Rex's presence at the Galactic Defense Academy became a living, breathing psychological puzzle the aliens couldn't solve. They were conditioned to categorize entities as either threats or assets, friend or foe. Rex broke that binary. He was both. He possessed the physical power to incapacitate a soldier and the gentle disposition to comfort a frightened cadet. This duality forced everyone who encountered him into a state of cognitive dissonance. They had to hold two contradictory ideas in their minds at once. This creature could protect me, and this creature could harm me. The true power of that tension was that Rex himself controlled which version they saw based on his social bonds. His ability to modulate perceived danger became his greatest strategic value. The Shadowborn incident proved he could detect and neutralize a threat their best technology missed, but his daily interactions proved he could also de-escalate tension without a single command. A low growl could clear a hallway. A wagging tail could open a conversation. He demonstrated that trust could project a more reliable form of security than any force field. You didn't need to dominate a potential opponent if you could make them an ally. This shifted the entire concept of defense from a physical barrier to a psychological one. For the Academy's command staff, this was a revelation. They began to see Rex not as a simple animal, but as a masterclass in nonverbal diplomacy and controlled deterrence. His value wasn't in his teeth, it was in his discernment. He knew when to bare them and when to hide them. This forced a complete reevaluation of human potential. Humanity's strength wasn't their limited technology or their physical frailty. It was their profound, almost reckless capacity for empathy. They had taken a predator and, through patience and mutual care, turned it into a guardian. They had weaponized loyalty itself. What if the most dangerous thing in a room wasn't a weapon but a choice? Rex's presence at the Galactic Defense Academy became a living, breathing psychological puzzle the aliens couldn't solve. They were conditioned to categorize entities as either threats or assets, friend or foe. Rex broke that binary. He was both. He possessed the physical power to incapacitate a soldier and the gentle disposition to comfort a frightened cadet. This duality forced everyone who encountered him into a state of cognitive dissonance. They had to hold two contradictory ideas in their minds at once. This creature could protect me, and this creature could harm me. The true power of that tension was that Rex himself controlled which version they saw based on his social bonds. His ability to modulate perceived danger became his greatest strategic value. The Shadowborn incident proved he could detect and neutralize a threat their best technology missed, but his daily interactions proved he could also de-escalate tension without a single command. A low growl could clear a hallway. A wagging tail could open a conversation. He demonstrated that trust could project a more reliable form of security than any force field. You didn't need to dominate a potential opponent if you could make them an ally. This shifted the entire concept of defense from a physical barrier to a psychological one. For the Academy's command staff, this was a revelation. They began to see Rex not as a simple animal, but as a masterclass in nonverbal diplomacy and controlled deterrence. His value wasn't in his teeth, it was in his discernment. He knew when to bare them and when to hide them. This forced a complete reevaluation of human potential. Humanity's strength wasn't their limited technology or their physical frailty. It was their profound, almost reckless capacity for empathy. They had taken a predator and, through patience and mutual care, turned it into a guardian. They had weaponized loyalty itself. This realization led to a profound doctrinal shift. The Academy began to formally recognize empathy as a tactical advantage. Training modules started to include lessons on cross-species social cues and bonding techniques. The goal was no longer just to create soldiers who could follow orders, but to create units that could build trust under pressure. They saw that a team bound by genuine camaraderie and mutual understanding was more resilient, more adaptive, and more effective than one bound solely by rank and discipline. Rex became the model for this new approach. He redefined the very meaning of being a guardian in a multi-species galaxy. A guardian wasn't just a sentry at a gate anymore. It could be a companion in a dormitory, a bridge in a dining hall, a mediator on a training field. Protection wasn't just about creating a perimeter nothing could breach. It was about creating a community nothing could divide. Rex's greatest psychological impact was making the aliens feel safe, not because he was controlled, but because he was trustworthy. His power was always present, but his choice to use it gently was what made him indispensable. This lesson in the strategic power of connection would become the foundation for a new era of galactic cooperation, prompting a final reflection on the bond that made it all possible. How does a civilization that's never seen a pet begin to understand a bond that defines an entire species? For the aliens at the Galactic Defense Academy, the relationship between Jake and Rex wasn't just unusual. It was an intellectual and emotional challenge. Their entire military culture was built around clear hierarchies, explicit commands, and self-reliance. The idea that a human and a canine could form a unit where loyalty was voluntary and protection was a mutual instinct felt like a foreign language they hadn't learned to speak. They saw Jake give an order and Rex choose to obey. They saw Rex sense a threat and Jake trust that instinct without question. This wasn't a master-servant dynamic. It was a conversation. A continuous, silent negotiation built on a foundation of earned respect and clearly shared goals. Jake found himself explaining it over and over, not in tactical terms, but in simple ones. He told them it wasn't about control. It was about partnership. Rex wants to work with me, he'd say. He wants to be part of my mission. His goals are my goals. This concept of shared purpose, rather than forced subjugation, was the key the aliens had been missing. They were so accustomed to seeing strength as a solitary trait, the lone warrior, the independent ship, that they missed the power of a combined effort. The bond showed them that true strength doesn't come from isolation. It multiplies through connection. A human and a dog together were far more capable than either could ever be alone. This living example became a new paradigm for the entire galaxy to witness. Millions of species, many of whom had only interacted through formal treaties or occasional conflict, now saw a different model for cooperation. It wasn't about complicated agreements or mutually assured destruction. It was about the simple, stubborn act of choosing to trust someone completely different from you. It was about believing that an alien cadet, a human, and a golden retriever could all want the same thing: safety, companionship, a shared home. This human optimism, this refusal to see difference as a barrier, began to spread through the Academy like a quiet signal. Rex's wagging tail became the perfect symbol for this shift. It was a nonverbal signal everyone could understand. It didn't need translation. It meant happiness, welcome, a lack of threat. It was empathy in motion, a physical bridge across a vast biological and cultural divide. Cadets who once flinched at his approach now looked for that wag as a sign that all was well. They learned to read his other signals too, the perked ears of curiosity, the relaxed pant of contentment, the focused stare of vigilance. They weren't just learning about a dog. They were learning a new way to communicate, to connect, to build trust without saying a word. The resolution of this cultural journey was the most profound change of all. The initial fear, the suspicion, the belief that Rex was a primitive and dangerous beast, didn't vanish because of a weapons demonstration or a show of force. It transformed through 1,000 small moments of simple, stubborn optimism. It was the optimism of a dog who kept offering a dropped napkin, even when people were afraid to take it. It was the optimism of a human who kept believing his friend would be accepted. It was the optimism of alien cadets who decided to be curious instead of cautious. This transformation proved that fear isn't defeated by dominance. It's eroded by persistent, gentle proof that something better is possible. The bond between Jake and Rex didn't just give the galaxy a new security asset. It gave them a new blueprint for community, one based on the radical idea that we are all stronger together. This growing sense of a shared future, built on these unexpected partnerships, leads to one final question about what comes next. Commander Vex Thornblade stood on the command deck, looking out at the star-dusted blackness. His practiced eye still saw potential threats in every uncharted system, rival empires in every dark corner. But the view had changed. Where he once saw only strategic dominions and hostile borders, he now saw something else, a universe full of potential allies. The old doctrines, the ones that demanded absolute control and preemptive neutralization of unknowns, felt rigid and simplistic now. They were blueprints for a galaxy of walls and checkpoints, not a galaxy of bridges. The future, he realized, might depend on embracing a form of strength his people had never considered: interspecies companionship. The kind that couldn't be legislated or mandated, only built through patience and a shared willingness to trust. Rex was no longer just Jake's dog. He had become a symbol recognized across dozens of worlds, his image transmitted in news briefs and policy documents. He represented a cooperative potential that was neither military nor purely peaceful. It was something new. A third path. This reframed humanity's entire role in galactic affairs. They weren't the desperate survivors from a fragile world anymore, pleading for a place at the table. They were becoming senior partners, not despite their unconventional methods, but because of them. Their unique ability to form bonds to turn a potential predator into a protector, into family, was not a quirky cultural artifact. It was a strategic asset of unimaginable value. The true strength of a civilization, Vex understood, might not be measured in fleet size or weapon yields. It might be measured in its capacity to turn strangers into family members, to build pacts that transcended biology. This realization felt like unlocking a new destiny for stellar civilization itself. For eons, advancement had been a linear path of better technology, stronger materials, faster engines. What if the next great leap wasn't technological but social? What if the key to surviving the vast unknowns of the cosmos wasn't to dominate them, but to connect with them, to approach difference not with suspicion, but with the stubborn, optimistic belief that common ground could be found? The resolution of this galactic-scale shift wasn't found in a treaty signing or a fleet deployment. It was found in the simple, repeated image of a good dog, a loyal pack of cadets from a dozen species, and their shared willingness to choose friendship over fear. It was a choice made every day in the dining hall, in the dormitory, on the training field. Each small act of trust was a vote for a different kind of future. This new path forward isn't about discarding security. It's about redefining it. Security no longer means building a higher wall. It means having more eyes watching your back, more ears listening for danger, more instincts you can trust. It means your perimeter isn't just a line on a map. It's the bonds you share with those who would protect it with you. The galaxy's future, once a cold calculus of force and counterforce, now feels warmer. It feels like it has room for more than just soldiers and treaties. It has room for partners. The journey from that first tense day in the hangar to this moment on the command deck proves that fear is a reflex, but trust is a choice. And when a civilization learns to choose trust, even when every instinct and every ancient doctrine screams caution, that is when it truly begins to grow up. It stops seeing the universe as a territory to be conquered and starts seeing it as a home to be shared. This is the legacy of one cadet and his dog. They didn't bring a new weapon to the galaxy. They brought a new blueprint for peace, and it was written in the simple, universal language of a wagging tail. So what did a golden retriever teach the galaxy? That humanity's real strength isn't in our tech, but in our bonds. Our ability to turn potential threats into partners, to see a loyal companion where others see a beast. That's the story we're celebrating here. Human resilience built on connection. If you want more tales that explore human creativity in the cosmos, hit that subscribe button. Remember this: sometimes changing everything doesn't need a fleet. It just needs a good dog and the courage to choose friendship.